Benito Americare Andrea Mussolini was a very complex anime character to say the least. He is always seen as a bad guy, a villain, a man who wanted to destroy the world with his best pals Adolphus and Frank. But I'm here to give you a counter-argument. Mussolini was actually the victim. As the world was turning against him, even his own allies invaded his country and planned his demise from the beginning. But why does the media do this to Mussolini? And is he really to blame? We have to start all the way back at the fall of the Roman Empire. Ever since the empire collapsed and Rome was sacked, the Italian peninsula saw very little success in making their people great again. Italians saw invasions from barbarians, Huns, Greeks, the French, Muslims, the Iberian Peninsula, and plenty others. Italy is united, and when the Allies are victorious in World War I, the Italian kingdom wasn't even handed over German colonies in Asia and Africa, all of Dalmatia, Corsica, all of Tyrol, the Duchy of Carniola, parts of Savoy, and a huge territory of the Ottoman Empire. Outrageous. Istria, the port of Trieste, southern Tyrol, and lordship over Albania were absolutely not enough. Benito was so angry about the oppression of his people that he would often get into knife fights with his fellow classmates, having to be expelled multiple times by those probably Austro-Hungarian spies as teachers, trying to prevent Mussolini from getting his diploma. Although after he finally got his diploma, he changed his mind and became a schoolteacher himself for a short while. In order to spy on the Austrians, he moved to Tyrol in 1909, but he was soon expelled by the Austrian dogs for speaking out against militarism and nationalism. Once the Austrians noticed the danger this man possessed, they forcefully removed him and tossed him back to Italy. This was an unacceptable move by the Austrians, and Mussolini would soon get his revenge after World War I, when southern Tyrol was handed over to the Italians. Although, when Mussolini returned to Italy after being expelled from Austria, he soon changed his mind again and started working for a right-wing newspaper, Il Popolo d'Italia, editing pro-militarist and nationalist articles. Finally, Mussolini got his revenge when in 1915, Italy declared war on the evil, pesky Austrians and invaded Tyrol and Istria. Mussolini personally led these attacks and was heralded as a hero by the King of Italy after conquering the entirety of the Austro-Hungarian Empire single-handedly. However, Mussolini soon overheard a conversation between the Italian king and his generals that Italy was looking for support to surprise attack the French. This outraged Mussolini to the point where he personally got together with a bunch of his drinking buddies, and on October 1922, he marched into Rome, with screaming applause by everyone who knew him as a war hero, the man who killed off all of the Austrians and saved the day. The king, knowing he was bested, gave Mussolini the prime minister role of Italy in order to keep his people happy. After this event, the Austrian menace would see Mussolini as now an absolute threat, one that had to be dealt with immediately. It's the year 1934, and Mussolini has arranged a meeting with a new character that will be talked about more in a later episode, Adolphus Hitler. In short, these two became very good friends in their shared interest in nationalism and militarism. They would go out on lunch together, have nice long walks in the park, and would greet supporters and sign autographs while on nice Sunday afternoon drives. But our hero Mussolini always had a strange suspicion of Adolphus. He always seemed a bit off, but at the same time a bit familiar. Mussolini wanted to prove to Adolphus Hitler that our hero was the top dog in the relationship by invading the technologically superior nation of Wakanda. Sources led Mussolini to understand Wakanda had been holding Italian citizens captive for years, and have been experimenting on them to improve their own technology. The Wakandans needed to understand how the Italians were so good at warfare in order to defeat them later on. But this would never come, because in October of 1935, Mussolini personally led the charge against Wakanda, just like his golden years fighting the Austrians. The defeat of Wakanda was swift, with Italy having only a few casualties, while the entire nation of Wakanda was destroyed for its war crimes against the Italian people. In 1940, Adolphus suddenly invaded France without telling Mussolini. Hitler stopped answering calls or text messages, which infuriated Mussolini. Mussolini frantically contacted the French to let them know that Adolphus was no longer texting Mussolini back.
Grandi quando dominammo il mare. Roma arrivare l'impero prima di avere schiacciato la potenza marittima di Cartagine. Perché il Mediterraneo, che non è un oceano, e che ha due sbocchi soli, vigilati d'altrui.
But when France announced their surrender, Mussolini again changed his mind and invaded France, and was heralded for having the greatest victory against the French in the Battle of the Alps. By 1943, Mussolini's suspicion of Adolphus had reached an all-time high. One day, Mussolini had gotten an anonymous letter informing him of something dreadful. Hitler was actually born in the city of Braunau am Inn, Austria. This explains everything. Hitler was actually an Austrian the whole time. Mussolini hated himself for not seeing this sooner and quickly reacted, going to the king to inform him that he would declare war on Hitler. But there had been yet another ruse against our hero. The king had actually already signed a peace treaty with the Allies and allowed the German army into the north of the country, coming for Mussolini to avenge their lost Austrian brothers. Mussolini was an amazing warrior, and fought off 500 German and King's men with nothing more than his bare hands before escaping and heading for the Swiss border. Mussolini knew that the Austrian world order was against him and that they were in charge of Germany, the Allies, and there was nothing he can do. Although our hero fought bravely for his life, he was found on his way to Switzerland by some of the king's men and was shot. In conclusion, Benito Amilcare Andrea Mussolini is very misunderstood and one of the most complex anime characters in modern media. We should all be wary in our everyday lives about the Austrian menace, especially if you are Italian or have Italian blood. I myself am about a quarter Sicilian, so I am always ready to fight an Austrian when I see one. Many of you remember the time I was legitimately kidnapped by Serbs when they were angry about my Border Porn series episode where I worked on the Balkans. I'm just sorry to say, I really need to... Yes? Okay, yeah, I'll speed it up, yeah, so we're also just going to go ahead and annex Hungary. This has happened to me multiple times by Austrians who wanted to destroy me for my superior genes and military tactical knowledge. Much of what I learned about how to defend myself from Austrians, I learned from reading about Mussolini. So please everybody, keep yourself safe.